You've probably watched a corporate presentation or a political speech and thought, how did this person get there? Where was the merit? How does someone so blatantly incompetent end up standing in front of a microphone telling the rest of us what to do? It's an unsettling question, and it lingers because we know deep down that competence doesn't always equal power. The boardroom is filled with faces that weren't the best at the job, but were excellent at something else: manipulating perceptions. Today, I'm going to pull back the curtain on one of the most uncomfortable truths about power, the brutal law that lifts fools and buries the talented, and show you why those in charge know exactly how to use it. This isn't just a rant about bad leaders. We're diving straight into the thinking of a controversial 16th century philosopher who understood what most people still refuse to believe. Niccolo Machiavelli saw the world as it was, not as we wish it to be. While idealists debated how rulers should behave in a perfect society, he dissected how they actually kept power. He didn't sugarcoat it. He wrote down the rules of survival and domination, rules so raw and unsettling that his name became synonymous with deceit. Yet, buried in his words is a clear warning. Those who ignore these laws do so at their own peril. Picture this: a politician in a suit, beaming at the camera, telling you everything is under control. Behind him, people are panicking, hospitals are overwhelmed, and nothing is actually under control. Or imagine a charismatic startup founder promising to change the world, securing billions in funding, and then delivering nothing but a fancy logo and empty promises. We've seen this story over and over. If it feels deliberate, that's because it often is. There is a twisted logic that rewards style over substance, confidence over competence, and it's been operating for centuries. Machiavelli pointed out that appearing competent can be more important than being competent. That's rule number one in the brutal game of power. Machiavelli's story begins in Renaissance Florence, where betrayal was as common as the afternoon market. Driven into exile after a political shake-up, he had no seat at the table, so instead of plotting, he started observing. He watched princes lie, break promises, and still hold on to their thrones. He saw thugs become dukes and geniuses remain scribes. He realized that no one cares about your good intentions if you can't secure your position first. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are, he wrote. Machiavelli understood that when you're fighting for power, perception is your armor. Your true skills matter less than your ability to project strength and certainty. We can already hear the objections, but what about ethics? Aren't we supposed to be better than that? Hold that thought. Moral considerations are luxuries that those in power exploit precisely because they know most people cling to them. Machiavelli didn't preach immorality for its own sake. He warned that sticking stubbornly to morality while others play dirty is a guaranteed path to irrelevance. He argued that a leader must learn how to not be good and use that knowledge according to necessity. That might sound monstrous, but look at the world around you. The leaders who survive and thrive aren't necessarily the kindest or smartest. They're the ones who understand when to flex and when to feign. This brings us to our first dark lesson. Fear lasts longer than love. History's villains and heroes both understood that fear commands obedience. Love inspires, yes, but fear endures. Just ask the people of ancient Rome who lived under Emperor Nero, a man so obsessed with his own image that he played the lyre while the city burned. Or consider a more contemporary example. Perhaps a CEO who smiles at you as he praises company culture, then fires entire departments overnight. He'll tell you it's about efficiency. He knows you'll never forget that sting. In tough times, you might love someone who promises comfort, but you'll obey someone who convinces you there will be consequences for disobedience. Machiavelli argues that rulers should aim to be feared if they cannot be both feared and loved, because love is fickle and fear is reliable. Look at modern politics. Leaders who project unwavering confidence, even when nothing is stable, often gather more votes than those who admit complexity. "I alone can fix it" becomes a rallying cry. It doesn't matter whether it's true, it matters how it makes people feel. Confidence creates the illusion of competence, and people crave certainty. Ironically, that confidence often masks incompetence. This is where the Dunning-Kruger effect comes into play. Those who know little overestimate themselves, while those who know a lot underestimate. The loudest voice in a room can drown out the most informed. It's a cognitive bias that Machiavelli didn't have a name for, but he observed it in action. Think of the rulers who ascend through overconfidence, not skill. They believe their own hype. Their followers do too. The second dark lesson Machiavelli hints at: appearances matter more than reality. We live in a world of optics, posture, attire, tone. These things are currency. Niccolo observed that being truly good can make you vulnerable, because the truly good struggle with nuance and doubt. They hesitate. Meanwhile, incompetent individuals often feel no such burden. They speak in absolutes, offer simplistic solutions, and exude certainty. That certainty is magnetic. It draws in followers and investors. Confidence signals competence, even when it's just a show. A classic example of this phenomenon comes from the story of Elizabeth Holmes, founder of Theranos. Holmes built a multi-billion-dollar empire by promising a revolutionary blood testing machine. The problem? It didn't work. Investors and media hailed her as the next Steve Jobs. The company's board included former secretaries of state and military leaders, none of whom were experts in biomedical technology. Holmes's turtleneck and unwavering conviction created the illusion of substance. She used Machiavelli's playbook: appear competent, surround yourself with prestigious names, and never show doubt. For years it worked. Investors poured money in. The press adored her. Meanwhile, talented scientists who questioned the technology were ignored or silenced. This is Machiavelli's lesson amplified. Truth takes a back seat to perception. And when reality finally broke through, the damage was enormous. Another infamous case: the Dunning-Kruger effect in politics. Think of a populist candidate offering simplistic answers to global economic problems. They might sound appealing: all we have to do is X. In contrast, an expert explains that the problem requires multiple complex solutions and compromises. Who do people trust? Too often they choose the charismatic oversimplifier. The confidence illusion is powerful. People prefer conviction and simplicity over nuance, even when nuance is necessary. This isn't because voters are fools. It's because the human brain is wired to seek certainty and avoid uncertainty. Studies show that in times of stress or fear, people gravitate toward those who provide absolute answers, even if those answers are wrong. Let's take a moment to ask you, how often have you seen this in your own life? Have you witnessed someone get promoted, not because they were the best, but because they talked the loudest? Or maybe you've seen colleagues with nuanced, well-researched opinions ignored because their answers started with, "It depends." Comment below if you've experienced it. Sharing your story keeps you aware of how this law plays out in real time. The third dark lesson is that the incompetent shield themselves with loyal incompetence. Machiavelli wrote, "The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. Strong, competent leaders recruit talent. Weak leaders recruit flattery. An insecure leader avoids hiring anyone smarter than him. He fears being exposed. That's why incompetent rulers surround themselves with people who will not challenge them. In ancient Rome, Emperor Commodus replaced seasoned administrators with gladiators and sycophants, accelerating the empire's decay. Today, it might look like a corporate manager who only promotes yes men, or a president who appoints loyal donors to key positions instead of qualified experts. This creates an incompetence cascade, a network where no one dares to challenge the boss and collective incompetence becomes institutionalized. One vivid illustration of this dynamic is the story of Enron, once considered America's most innovative company. Enron's leadership cultivated a culture where questionable accounting practices flourished. Executives surrounded themselves with loyalists who wouldn't expose misconduct. Dissenting voices were pushed out. The result? A spectacular collapse that destroyed jobs and pensions for thousands. It's easy to blame a few bad apples, but the deeper issue was a network of incompetence protecting itself from scrutiny. Machiavelli would argue that the company's leaders, by encouraging blind loyalty over competence, engineered their own demise. Our fourth dark lesson concerns the human craving for cognitive closure. People don't like unresolved tension. We prefer definitive answers even when reality is uncertain. Machiavelli noted that appearances are more influential than reality because most people are satisfied with what they see rather than what truly is. This cognitive bias still drives politics and markets. Cognitive closure pushes us to choose leaders who make sweeping declarations, even when they oversimplify. It's soothing to believe that problems can be solved by one slogan. Machiavelli observed that the masses are more influenced by things that seem than by things that are. In modern terms, voters want clear, simple answers, even if truth is complex. This explains why politicians who say, "I alone can fix this," often outperform those who say, "This is complicated and we must work together." Consider climate change debates. Scientists painstakingly present data, outline uncertainty ranges, and propose complex policy solutions. Meanwhile, a populist declares, "It's all a hoax," or "I have a simple plan to solve it." Which message is easier to digest? Complexity invites doubt and requires mental effort. Simplicity offers immediate closure. That desire for closure makes us vulnerable to manipulative leaders, reinforcing Machiavelli's lesson that the crowd is swayed more by what appears to be true than what is true. This leads naturally to the fifth dark lesson. Moral scruples can handicap your rise. Machiavelli urged rulers to learn how not to be good and to use that skill according to necessity. He wasn't telling you to be evil, he was telling you to be adaptable. To survive, you must understand that your competitors may cross lines you wouldn't dream of crossing. The person willing to do whatever it takes has an edge. In ancient Rome, Julius Caesar outmaneuvered his rivals by crossing the Rubicon, both literally and metaphorically, violating a law that separated military and civic power. His opponents hesitated to break norms. He did not. He seized power. In modern business, think about companies engaging in unethical strategies like price fixing or intellectual property theft. When such practices work, it pressures honest competitors to either join the race to the bottom or risk failure. In politics, smear campaigns and misinformation become normalized. Studies show that individuals with psychopathic traits, including a lack of empathy and a willingness to manipulate, are disproportionately represented in top leadership positions when those traits are combined with charm. It's a chilling thought. Your moral compass might make you less willing to compete ruthlessly, and in the game of power, ruthlessness often wins. Ask yourself, have you ever felt pressured to cross a line because everyone else is doing it? Have you watched ethical colleagues fall behind while those who cut corners rise? Write your experience in the comments. Recognizing the hidden incentives at work is the first step toward navigating them. Our sixth dark lesson highlights how certain environments reward incompetence. Machiavelli wrote that different systems produce different kinds of leaders. Environments with clear, immediate feedback, like surgery or engineering, select for competence. If a surgeon is incompetent, the patient dies. If an engineer miscalculates, the bridge collapses. There's no hiding. In contrast, fields with delayed or diffuse feedback, like politics or high finance, allow incompetence to flourish. If a policy fails, blame it on opponents. If a risky investment crashes, blame it on the market. In politics, centralizing power with weak checks and balances fosters incompetent leadership. Historical examples include Rome before collapse or the Soviet Union. In contrast, structures like Germany's dual-board corporate governance, separate management and oversight, reducing incompetence at the top. Consider how CEO compensation often rewards short-term stock price increases. This incentivizes risky strategies that boost quarterly profits, but endanger long-term stability. Meanwhile, the leader's reputation soars, even if the company collapses years later. The 2008 financial crisis exposed this dynamic. Subprime lenders pursued immediate gains despite systemic risk. Regulators and investors trusted the facade. When reality hit, the fallout was massive. Understanding that incentive structures matter is crucial. Machiavelli would remind us that those who set the rules design them to their advantage. If the game rewards superficial success over substance, expect more incompetent winners. The seventh dark lesson is about psychological tactics used to secure power. Incompetent leaders don't cling to power by accident. They use specific strategies. Machiavelli observed that weak rulers surround themselves with loyal fools, but he also noted that division and fear are tools of control. Leaders exploit tribalism, dividing the population into us versus them. Criticism becomes treason. Facts become opinions. Followers identify with the leader so strongly that an attack on the leader feels like an attack on themselves. Modern cognitive science calls this identity fusion. Cult leaders, authoritarian politicians, and even celebrity CEOs use it. They equate loyalty to them with loyalty to a nation, a cause, or a culture. Once followers fuse their identity with the leaders, they stop questioning. Another tactic is manufacturing crises. A leader who continuously creates emergencies keeps the public anxious and distracted. When you're bombarded with scandals, outrages, and crises, your cognitive resources are spent reacting rather than analyzing. Psychologists call this cognitive load. A heavy cognitive load makes you more susceptible to manipulation. Meanwhile, the leader pushes policies that go unchallenged. This is why incompetent leaders thrive in chaotic environments. Confusion is their ally. They also rely on doublethink, the Orwellian ability to hold contradictory beliefs at once. One day, the leader declares something true. The next day, it's false. Followers internalize the habit of not questioning the shift. Truth becomes fluid and accountability dissolves. When Machiavelli said that the vulgar crowd is more influenced by appearances, he acknowledged our vulnerability to inconsistency when we're overwhelmed. Finally, incompetent leaders exploit economic insecurity. People struggling financially are more receptive to simple promises. The leader offers scapegoats, blames outsiders or institutions, and provides easy answers. It's intoxicating to believe that one person can fix everything. Machiavelli knew that fear of loss, of livelihood, safety, pride, makes people abandon critical thinking. By controlling resources, controlling information, and controlling identity, a leader controls the population. At this point, you might feel a sense of despair. If incompetent, manipulative people rise to power with these dark strategies, are we doomed to be ruled by fools? This is where Machiavelli's lessons become liberating rather than depressing. He wasn't writing to celebrate the ugly parts of human nature. He was writing so we could see them. Understanding the rules allows you to navigate them. This brings us to how we defend ourselves. The first defense is awareness. When you know that confidence can mask incompetence, you're less likely to fall for it. When you recognize your own cognitive biases, the need for certainty, the comfort of simple answers, you become less susceptible to manipulation. Develop intellectual humility. Admit what you don't know, seek evidence, and stay skeptical of easy solutions. Studies show that intellectually humble people are better at evaluating information and less likely to be swayed by charisma alone. Second, cultivate media literacy. In a world where media can be weaponized, choosing your sources carefully is an act of resistance. Dramatic headlines, and look for patterns rather than isolated events. Limit your exposure to constant outrage. Focus on depth rather than noise. As investor Warren Buffett says, really successful people say no to almost everything. Apply that to your news consumption. Reject the endless stream of distractions. Seek substance. Third, embrace philosophical reflection. This sounds old-fashioned, but regular reflection protects you from emotional reactivity. Stoic philosophers practice daily journaling to examine their actions and motives. When you pause to reflect instead of reacting, you regain control. Machiavelli might have agreed, reflective minds are harder to manipulate. On a systemic level, we need better institutional design. We can't rely on individual vigilance alone. Systems must incentivize competence and discourage incompetence. This means creating feedback loops where results matter, establishing checks and balances, and promoting diversity of thought. Robust accountability, cognitive diversity, and transparency make it harder for incompetence to hide. Companies, with independent oversight boards and whistleblower protection, discourage managerial incompetence. Democracies with free presses and independent judiciaries can resist authoritarians who rely on chaos and loyalty networks. Embracing these structures doesn't guarantee perfection, but they reduce the space where fools flourish. Educating ourselves and others is critical, not just technical skills, but critical thinking, ethics, and an understanding of human psychology. Schools should teach how power operates, not just memorize dates and facts. If the populace understands Machiavelli, the Dunning-Kruger effect, cognitive closure, and network effects, they are less easily manipulated. Knowledge is power precisely because ignorance is a tool of control. Let's revisit our opening question. Why do incompetent people rise to power? Because they exploit our cognitive biases and the structures that reward appearance over substance. They leverage fear and simplicity to override nuance. They select subordinates who will never challenge them. They create chaos to wear us down. They cross ethical lines while the rest of us hesitate. They thrive in environments that prioritize short-term wins over long-term stability. And they know that if they keep us insecure, overwhelmed, and emotionally invested, we will continue to reward them. But what if you use the same knowledge, not to manipulate, but to protect yourself and others? Imagine recognizing when confidence is just a mask. Imagine seeing when a leader's network is built on incompetence. Imagine noticing how often your own desire for simple answers leads you to ignore complexity. Understanding these dark laws doesn't make you a villain, it makes you a survivor. Machiavelli wasn't glorifying cruelty, he was exposing the game so those who prefer integrity could play smarter. The future doesn't belong exclusively to fools. Intelligence combined with moral courage can still reshape our systems. If we stop pretending that the game is fair and start learning the rules. We've covered 7 dark lessons in this journey. Fear outlasts love. Appearances trump reality. Incompetence breeds loyal incompetence. Simplicity seduces. Moral scruples can hinder your rise. Structural incentives matter. And psychological tactics sustain bad leaders. These patterns aren't new, they're woven into the fabric of history and psychology. Yet they're rarely talked about openly because facing them requires admitting uncomfortable things about ourselves. If you've ever wondered why a fool leads and a genius follows, you now have some answers. Which of these dark lessons shocked you the most? Have you witnessed them in your workplace, community, or nation? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might help someone else recognize the pattern, and if this video changed how you see power, if it lit up something in your mind, remember to hit like and subscribe. We'll keep revealing the forbidden code that governs our world. Because the only thing more dangerous than ignorance is refusing to see the truth when it's right in front of you. The next time someone promises a magical solution, ask yourself, are they acknowledging complexity or offering comfort? When you see a leader surrounded by sycophants, ask, are they building a legacy of excellence or a fortress of incompetence? When you hesitate to take action because you want to stay good, ask, is the other side playing by the same rules? And if not, how will you defend yourself? If you've come this far, you've taken the first step toward reclaiming your power, but you're not done. Subscribe to Machiavelli Code Official and follow our journey. In the next video, we will uncover a law even darker than this one that explains why you think you have free will, when in fact you're living in a carefully manufactured reality. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and stay prepared. Because in the game of power, ignorance is defeat.